All right, Jack has an interview coming up with Tom Glavine a little bit later in the show. Glavine, one of three who got the call from Cooperstown on Wednesday. As we heard the announcement, it's Maddux, Glavine, and Thomas. And as we look at all three of these, and we'll talk about all of them, Maddux, Jack, seemed like the slam dunk, and he was 97.2% of the vote.
Right, Bob. There's no doubt about it. He was the slam dunk. A lot of speculation leading up to it. Could he get a unanimous vote? That's not going to happen. There are some writers out there who have just decided they're not going to put guys in on their first year. I don't want to get caught up in that because I want to talk about Maddux and what he was able to do out there on the mound. I remember one spring training going to Orlando to interview him, and he said, listen, let me finish my work and I'll be ready in about 45 minutes. I just got a little bit I have to do. Sure enough, he was back in about 44 minutes because he said once he had his fastball command for the day, once he felt good about where his fastball was, he could do so many other things. And that's what this guy was on the mound. He was an artist. I used to love when Joe Torre would say he threw balls that looked like strikes and he threw strikes that were balls.
And you hear about the stories that he's not afraid to purposely throw a ball on 2-2 to go to 3-2. Some pitchers, Joel, would fear that, not Maddux.
It was interesting. I was with John Smoltz yesterday, and Smoltz talked about with Maddux, he had so many theories, and he said 100% work for Greg Maddux, about 50% could work for everyone. And he said you had to be able to parcel them out because he said he was dealing with it on a PhD level and that everyone else couldn't understand all the things he could do. But I will say this that's interesting. In this era of offense and this era when we wonder about PEDs, I think in this year and next year, the three great pitchers from the era, Maddux, Randy Johnson, and Pedro Martinez, who were able to dominate even when offense was so big, are all going to become Hall of Famers, and obviously Maddux leads the brigade.
Yeah, and what I find fascinating about Maddux, he doesn't have the strikeout totals of a Pedro or of a Randy Johnson or even a Kurt Schilling. It's just that pitch conservation, 70 pitches, 8 innings, really overwhelmed us.
When you were watching him, did you ever kind of think, you've seen so much in this game, Kenny, you're not really wowed by anything, but the way you'd see him handle hitters and use, throw an 87-mile-an-hour fastball or a little changeup to get hitters out.
Yeah, he was unique.
Say, how did that happen, right?
Yeah, exactly, because there's no K cards in the stands when he's doing it. It's just that mastery, that command.
All right, so let's talk a little bit now. Maddux, if we take a look at a graphic here, Greg Maddux, highest voting percentage. Again, Tom Seaver is tops. Nolan Ryan was second, 97.2. Jack, to your point, I think we're not, at this point, ever going to worry about the percentage. As for Tom Glavine, he comes in with 91.9%, a resounding victory for not just one Brave, but two Braves will be going to the Hall.
All right, I think it's kind of neat that these guys go in simultaneously because they were linked for so much of their career. And you talk about Glavine, and he was an artist in his own right. He was a guy who was going to use his fastball to both sides of the plate. He wanted to get to the point where he could throw that changeup, and he had a great changeup. I know from talking to some hitters who had to face him, they said they'd be looking for that changeup, changeup, and maybe they were looking for it right there, and he would just push it outside an inch or two. These two guys we should talk about. I wonder how they would be with umpires now getting graded and rated, because what Maddux and Glavine did better than anyone is if the umpire was giving them 6 inches, they were taking all 6 of those inches on the corners, and they absolutely tormented hitters that way.
And look, you could expand this. Bobby Cox is going to be part of this as well, so it's really going to have an Atlanta flair when they're celebrated in late July in Cooperstown. And Glavine, to me, is even more mysterious how he was great than Maddux. Because, people say, well, Maddux's stuff was great. The movement was late and tight. He had multiple pitches. Glavine didn't really have a good breaking ball. He certainly didn't have a big-time fastball. What he had was intellect and indexing. He knew how to set up hitters and put them away. And I think the most underrated part of Tom Glavine's career, toughness. Talk to guys who play with him. Those first 20 years, never spent the day on the DL. A guy who felt the responsibility of being out there every 5 days. We think about in that era, Steve Avery pitched with that team. How great he was for 3 years. But Tom Glavine was great for 20. It's why he's going to Cooperstown.
Another component with Glavine and Maddux, their athleticism. Maddux, 18 Gold Gloves, and Glavine was the amateur hockey player. John Feinstein wrote a book about Glavine and Mike Messina, where Glavine talked about the importance of hitting as in the National League and getting your team another run or two with bunting and the occasional hit, and how important that was to his game, too.
All right, so we got two pitchers going in, and then we talk about the slugger going in, and that's Frank Thomas, 521 home runs. Been a while since the slugger's been inducted, but he's in there.
Just an absolute monster in the back batter's box, Bob, and when you looked at what he would do production-wise, but also a smart hitter, a guy who was willing to take his walks, that's why he had the on-base percentage and the OPS that he had.
Also DHing a lot later in his career with the White Sox, but again, it pays off for him in the voting.
No doubt about it, and just to throw off of your idea, Jack, finished with more walks than strikeouts in his career, something in this era where free swinging is up all the time and nobody really cares about the number of strikeouts. And the thing that struck me about Thomas when I looked at his career is I knew he had the 2 MVP seasons, and when I checked his career, I thought I was going to see 3 good seasons, 5 good seasons. I mean, he had like 12 unbelievable slash-line seasons that carry him, even though he was a bad defensive player who hardly played defense 50% of the time as a DH, and a bad base runner. But the offense was just overwhelming.